I'm Doug Henshin, VP and Principal Analyst of Constellation Research, covering data to decisions.
And I'm Diane Hinchcliffe, VP and Principal Analyst, covering future of work and CIO issues, and we're your co-hosts for episode 37 of CRTV.
So we're here to talk about the news, the trends involved in enterprise tech. And this week, Andy Thurai is going to share a report on incident management in the cloud era. And then following that, we'll revisit last month's Constellation Research Ambient Experience Summit and share the highlights of Dion's panel discussing getting the right stakeholder voice at the right time. Dion, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you bet. It was actually one of the best panels at the Ambient Experience Summit, so be sure to catch that later on in the show. But we had an all-star cast. Cindy Zhao, a friend of Constellation, Jennifer Murphy, Julia Bardmesser, and we really tried to get into the details of how are we going to connect better with our stakeholders, given we're connected to them digitally all the time, but we're not really taking advantage of that connection. And so we talked about the common techniques about how to understand our customers better. We typically do surveys and other voice of the customer activities, and then we segment our customers and we do targeted marketing to each segment with messages that we think will resonate with them. And we talked about whether that's really the right approach. How do we develop the communications chain, and really the ultimate goal, which is one-to-one personalization. To understand your customers so well. We even joked that we'll eventually be creating digital twins of each of our customers, and we'll be able to know in advance whether or not a marketing message or a personalization will really resonate. But really the takeaway was we need to reorganize our processes better for customer experience. We have to be able to remove the friction between us and our customers as much as possible, although a speaker later in the day said not too much friction. But it was really an eye-opener, given digital marketing teams and digital engagement teams are growing rapidly, and we're really trying to understand how to gather all this data and then use it. And so we have the consensus was we have a way to go, but we're heading in the right direction. And so a lot of good insights, and I encourage you to watch that later in the show.
Well, last week, Elon Musk announced that he's calling off his $44 billion bid to buy Twitter. Or is he? A lot of speculation that it's a negotiating tactic, that he's trying to get a better deal from the Twitter board in the wake of the tech stock meltdown of recent months. Obviously, the deal was struck when valuations were very high, and valuations are much lower these days. So a lot of people saying it may not be even worth $30 billion. So personally, for me, Twitter is offering less and less value for me these days. Now that I'm back at a lot of industry events, I find that the top of the feed related to any event that I'm at is dominated by paid and pinned tweets. So you really can't see where the conversation is going on. You have to scroll way down to reach the real-time social conversation and interaction, such that it's far less organic, far less serendipitous discovery and conversation. And I know several analyst friends in the industry who have actually ditched their Twitter accounts, and they're doing everything social in LinkedIn. Diane, I know this is in your wheelhouse. What are some of your observations about Twitter, the Twitter deal, anything you want to talk about on social?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it is sad to see that. I think that the value of Twitter for some people has diminished, especially if you don't have a significant following. There's still no better platform for horizontal reach that anyone can kind of jump into a conversation. You kind of see everything globally much more easily than on any other platform. And there's so many world leaders and executives on the platform who have large followings, and that sparked really great debate, including Musk himself. But I think your comments are spot on in terms of it's getting a little overdeveloped. It used to be a wonderful forum, but it was green field, so everyone had a chance. And I think that the playing field's not as level as it used to be. And they're really going to have to deal with that. LinkedIn is rising as a real conversation platform, much more so. You still can't. No one ever wants you to live LinkedIn though, like live tweeting. And so, I think Twitter still offers a great way to spread information for those who are seeking it. It's most people have their own lists of the followers on different topics, and your content will still get out there, although you may not see that. And so. I think there's still value in the platform, but I think that they do have to make investments in bringing back some of the early magic and the serendipity.
So Dan, what else is going on in your world? What's your next news topic?
Well, last week I was actually in Milan for the 20th annual CIL Roundtable. This year was run by SDA McConaughey, which is the Harvard of Italy. They're the #1 school, business school in Italy. An amazing campus. We'll have some video for you. I flew the drone over the campus. Let's watch the video there. But it's really a sobering. It was supposed to be a kind of a joyous occasion, and it was. A lot of old friends saw each other. But these are top CIOs. Some of them are Fortune 10, some of them are Fortune 50, some of the biggest, most recognizable brands in the world. And the topic, of course, was about all the uncertainty and challenges. Supply chain challenges just don't quit. And just as we get out of the coronavirus, we have the war in Ukraine and sanctions, and really this concern that the dominoes are going to continue to fall. And one of the conclusions at the end, we realized that we've come to this kind of end of an era of open trade and globalization. And things that were very easy before to knit together global supply chains are very difficult now. Many of them are trying to divest properties all over the place to comply with sanctions, or just with corporate policy that they won't deal with certain countries that behave a certain way. There was really serious talk about what's going to happen with China. They're having serious economic problems, and they haven't really picked a side. And the same thing with India. There's a lot of waiting for are they going to try and play both sides? And they were such a huge supplier to the IT ecosystem that if they end up picking a side and it's not ours, what are we going to do? So there's a lot of work being put into place right now for the what ifs, laying groundwork. What if we have to pull out of China, which seems unthinkable, may not even be possible. And so that was those kind of issues really dominated the roundtable in an unexpected way. So we live in very interesting times. Was really the takeaway.
Interesting. Another I word. I was talking to Ray Wang, our CEO last week, and he was talking about the eyes, all the eyes we have in play. We have inflation, we have interest rates, we have inventory concerns, we have a continued concern about COVID infection, and then the invasion, which is a wild card on all those fronts. So really interesting, Diane. Still fresh on my mind from last month was the dueling customer events by Snowflake and Databricks, aka Hatfield and McCoy. These two companies are hot competitors at the top of the data and analytics market. And at Snowflake's event in mid-June in Vegas, they were really eager to cast the company as moving on from data warehouses. The moving data warehouses to the cloud is so 2014. They're saying, hey, today our customers are moving on to data science, to data exchange, to building next generation apps. Yet their keynote on that day 2 about data science and building app development was half empty by about halfway in. So my takeaway was that for the vast majority of Snowflake customers, really the appeal is precisely as a highly automated cloud data warehouse, and maybe that top 5%, 10% of customers will use it in a broader way. Meanwhile, at Databricks, they've been talking about Lakehouse since about 2020, but it was only at this year's Data and AI Summit in San Francisco late in June that they made generally available crucial components for data warehousing, including their Photon SQL query engine, their Unity data governance layer, and it was only last December that they introduced Databricks SQL. This is a sort of a performant SQL replacement for Spark SQL, which really wasn't up to data warehouse standards. So the bottom line for me was Snowflake is still mostly about data warehousing. Databricks today is still mostly used for data engineering and data science. So we're really at the beginning of this idea of Lakehouse and a converged single platform for BI, data engineering, and data science.
Yeah, well, Doug, that pendulum swings back and forth between best of breed and then when you try to mix and match all these solutions and you try and make everything work together or integrate, and it's so difficult and expensive, you go back and searching for that convergence again. So it'll be interesting to watch that space, and I think it's such an important area. You're going to have people doing both. Well, I'm surprised to hear we're seeing the first initial waves of layoffs in the tech sector, which has been an an area for almost over a decade, really has been a very secure area for employment. We've got effectively negative unemployment with about 1.3 to 1.5% unemployment in the tech sector, which is, the healthy amount is really about 3%. That's just people switching jobs. So there's actually effectively negative unemployment in the industry. And the good news is we're still there, but we're seeing the first real pullbacks. First, the crypto companies all began their layoffs a few weeks ago, up to a month ago, as they realized that that the winter kind of hit there, and that the long-awaited consolidation started to happen. But now we're seeing the next weaker set of players. Companies like Klarna are having mass layoffs. We're even hearing that Twitter will be doing a big pass on layoffs here soon, which is unusual, because everyone tries to get in there. So, but certain areas like cybersecurity and artificial intelligence and data science are still absolutely safe. But we're seeing that the very first kind of, if the economy continues the way it is, we might actually start to see a meaningful unemployment in the tech sector. Minor. I don't think it's ever going to be major, but we haven't seen the end of this yet.
I think those were just vulnerable sectors. Crypto. Let's hope. Twitter, in the throes of a bad, failed marriage, etc. I think your point on AI, cybersecurity, those are still really hot spaces. And in fact, they're talking about the demand for labor as one of these things that's fueling inflation. But that's all the time we have for today's news segment. Stay tuned. We're going to have Andy's report on incident management, and then Dion, his engaging panel discussion on tapping the right stakeholder voice at the right time.
Hey guys, this is your favorite AI analyst, Andy Thurai. I want to talk to you today about incident management in the cloud era. This is totally different than the old way incident used to be managed, because everything is built on microservices. So what is an incident? An incident is defined as an unplanned downtime or interruption that either partially or fully disrupts the service by offering a lesser quality service to the users. If the incident is major, then it's considered a crisis. So then what is incident management? In incident management, simply put, is an effective way to identify, potentially avoid if possible, but if not, get to the root cause of it very quickly, fix it before your customers find out about it. More importantly, avoid your team's fatigue. Okay, so then why are incidents scary? Well, to begin with, especially with the need and demand for always on, opportunities are more than ever to break. Data center-based IT operations were somewhat efficient. They used to be ITIL-based. They used CMDB, I know, which played a large part in it. But the newer cloud-based, cloud-native applications have changed the whole mix. Anatomy of a modern incident is totally different than what it used to be, especially when enterprises make many changes to the microservices, underlying microservices per day, per application, per microservices. So the unplanned downtimes are a nightmare for every IT executive. Every one of them claim in public that they are prepared enough to handle the situation. In reality, they are scared to death, every single one of them that I talk to, that if and when a disaster will strike. I mean, the major digital organizations who are supposed to be digital savvy and they got everything under control go down and stay down for days, if not weeks. So they are scared, when is a disaster going to strike us? Long drawn out war rooms and wasted time by valuable, costly IT resources and lost business opportunities. It costs a lot of money too. Every minute a critical application is down, not even counting the brand damage and or customer churn. And on average, an unplanned downtime costs enterprises upwards of $300,000 an hour. For large enterprises, it can cost anywhere from $1 to $5 million, excluding legal fines penalties. On an average, enterprise experience between 3 to 5 incidents per year. So it is a pretty big deal. Alerting everyone about everything is also a disaster waiting to happen. I analyzed about 9 vendors, actually 10 vendors, but Atlassian couldn't get the response to my spreadsheet in time, so I went with 9. So the 9 vendors, as you can see in the list here, are the ones that I analyzed. Every single one of them provide some capability, very strong capabilities that offer something in the incident management space. Not all vendors offer similar functionalities. No single vendor offers a complete end-to-end incident management solution. Each of them offer a portion of the solution which is very strong in their own respect. Almost every vendor, what is reviewed is good in what to do it in a certain way. Obviously, I've measured them on the parameters of incident identification, intake, notification, workflow, triaging, communication, incident postmortem, incident response, SRE capabilities, roadmap, TCO, cost, ROI, time to value, and many more. There are about 130 questions in the spreadsheet that I send out to and evaluated companies. So the next steps that I would really ask you to read the report and give me a feedback. And also, I would love it if you can read the adjacent reports that I dropped along with this as well. There's the trends in site reliability engineering, trends in incident management, a CIO guides to AI ops. They all go in parallel with each other. So I'm also planning to do a follow-up report based on the request from the C-level executives and some of the vendors. Anatomy of a modern incident, how to effectively manage incidents in a hybrid IT environment. Offering overview or a deep dive of a few of the select vendors in the report, case studies of some of the well-implemented incident management solutions. But leaving all that aside, I want to ask you for a favor. What do you want to see? Love to hear from you. Here are my social channels for you to follow. You could follow me at Andy Thurai or send a note to andy@constellation.com. I'd love to hear from you what report you want to see next. How can I help you? Or if you have questions about the report, please reach out to me. I want to talk to you. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
We're going to take the conversation, the lens, away from the people who are behind the scenes, the team of rivals that are trying to deliver digital experience to their stakeholders inside or outside the organization, even in the supply chain. And we're going to move that lens now to the customer. Or really, if we want to have the best word for it, the most encompassing word for it, we would say the stakeholder. How do we delight them? How do we attract them? How do we retain them? And so the conversation in the industry has been things like voice of the customer. How do we crawl inside their head and understand what they really need when they can't even articulate it in many cases? I'd like to turn it over to you guys a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your work and how you guys are thinking about really using modern practices. What's state of the art? What's happening in voice of the stakeholder?
So I think, the interesting thing, so when you originally sort of sent these questions and started to think about it, I think voice of the customer is really interesting because when I was thinking about the answers to this, I thought of a quote from a very surprising person, Matthew McConaughey. And he has this quote I was listening to his audiobook that says, be less impressed and more involved. And I sort of feel that sums up what a lot of organization strategies are when it comes to voice of the customer. What I mean by that is we did a study at the beginning of the year, and it showed that 36% of global companies had a voice of the customer program, but only 26% were actually turning the analytics and the data they got, the information they got, into action. Mm-hmm. Yep. So everyone's got it. They've got the tick box. Yay, voice of the customer. They've become impressed with themselves, but in turn, they've also become less involved.
Well, and because they think they've achieved it once they've captured the data, right? And that's the challenge, is that we're buried in our analytics, and then how do you make sure we operationalize that?
Yeah. So for me, that summed it up. Matthew McConaughey's be less impressed but more involved with voice of the customer.
I completely agree, because there is no argument anymore. Like, nobody in any company, I think, as far as I know, would ever argue you have to listen to your customer. We're customer centric. We're not product centric company. We're a customer centric company. So what does it mean to listen to the customer? For a really long time, I think it was, you go to a conference, so executive goes to the conference, there is an angry customer there, they tell them everything, or a pleased customer there, they tell them everything they think, and like, oh, that's voice of the customer. I just heard from the customer. So the struggle that we've had, and around data, well, in addition to other things, but around data was, okay, that's nice that you went and you listened to one customer, or maybe even 5, but what does the data tell you? Mm-hmm. And that's kind of been our maturity journey over 4 years. Collect the data and then make decisions based on the data. And then what do you do when your gut, our executives on the business side in our company have been in the business for 25, 30 years. They have well-developed gut of where the product customer should go. If the data contradicts that, are you going with the data? Or are you going to go with your gut?
Well, and the data should be about the customers. I mean, this is the thing, is our language actually tells us what we're thinking, and the customer doesn't actually exist, right? It's the voice of the customers, the stakeholders, right?
Yeah, it's stakeholders, and also like company like Voya, it's an interesting company because in our two major businesses, wealth and health, we're B2B2C. Mm-hmm. So we are to the employer sponsors, to the employees who then participate in our plans. So who are we talking to? So we have intermediaries that sell our plans. We have sponsors and employers that pay for them, provide them to their employees. And then we have employees who participate. Which one do we optimize for? That's a very difficult, we don't have an answer to that, really. I mean, how do you figure out how you move your product and your experience, your digital experience, your customer experience? Which customer? Because sometimes it's contradicting. Exactly. It's not always aligning.
Exactly. They greatly outnumber us. That's our challenge, right? So there's thousands of us and maybe millions of them.
Yeah.
And so we use things like personas to try and bucket them to keep it down to a manageable level. But it means we're gonna ignore some people, right?
Yeah. Segmentation. Yes. Name of the game. I always say go check whether your data supports your segmentation. Yeah. Because if you think this person belongs in that segment and you talk to them that way, this is on distribution side. Check if they're actually doing what you expect them to do. There is this error checking that modelers have always done, but I think on segmentation, it seems like a new concept when I say it, and which is kind of weird to me. But apparently, check whether when you assign people to segments, they actually belong to that segment, notwithstanding the age, gender, whatever it is, however you assign them.
If you think about the stakeholders and the different roles that they hold, you have to think about, how do I actually take all of that information, synthesize it, the data aspect of it, and the data is coming from everywhere now. Mm-hmm. Are they posting a complaint on social media versus calling into your line or talking to a sales rep, a customer service agent? So part of it is actually, I believe, bring in the human element. Technology is a great enabler, but you need people to actually own and run that technology. So part of it is, who do you have as the owner of each of these, milestones along the way of the customer voice to be representative of that particular function? Bringing them together, having conversations together around, are we delivering the best experience? So I'll give you an example. You might have a junior social media person running your Twitter account, and someone tweets in a complaint. What do you do with that at that point? Mm-hmm. Right. Most of the time, it's an emergency email. What do I do? How do I respond to this? So if you want to really deliver a great customer experience, and part of it is have that service committee and center already ready to go. Respond to these requests quickly. Have a communication chain to bring it all the way to the top. So, for example, at my last company too, we very much had this kind of a executive stakeholder EBC type of format with executive briefing center. We own specific customers. Anything that came from any of these channels went up to that executive that was the sponsor of that customer. So having that kind of supply chain almost for customer success is important.
Yeah, so to tie the threads that we've had here so far this morning, it sounds like the team of rivals needs to assign somebody to sit with the voice of the customer, really be ready to understand what they really need when these situations arise, right? Be able to handle the unexpected, the exception scenarios, all those fun things. So next topic. So personalization is the holy grail to say, all right, I can understand this customer enough to really provide them a uniquely differentiating experience. And I always say that the likely end game is going to be one-to-one personalization at some point. And I now see that the 360-degree view of the customer is turning into almost like a digital twin, where you could almost do focus groups with the customer without them even being there, if you had enough data, if you could personalize. So where are we on personalization? What are you guys doing in your efforts? How do we think about this to really get where we want to be?
So personalization is the name of the game. Like the number of times I now mentioned personalized, and there is a new one, hyper-personalized. hyper-personalized experience. Not entirely sure what's the difference between personalization and hyper-personalization.
Someone needed funding.
I agree. I use that when I need funding. I completely agree. Thank you. The name of the game is how much data you actually have, and then what do you do with it. And one of the things that we did make progress. So again, you say hyper-personalized, that's a lot easier to get funding. So there is acknowledgement that that's really important for the company strategy. Now, what do you need to do? Capability you need to build to actually be able to do it is still kind of an unknown country. Because you need to bring multiple data sets from multiple places internally and externally about your customer. You also need to collect all possible data, which is a lot of businesses that's been in place for many years aren't actually set up. They collect only the data they need for operations of that specific business, not necessarily everything that informs on what customer do. And then you need to add privacy because you don't want to spook the customer. You don't want to be so hyper-personalized.
You don't want to be creepy, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you do not want to be creepy. So walking that line is not that simple. And from technology perspective, I think the biggest challenge that we've had for years and years, and it's still even with all the advancements in AI, machine learning, you would think that would be solved, is what I call common keys problem. When you bring multiple data sets, you want to connect it to actually the same person. You need to identify that same person
across channels.
Across multiple channels, multiple data sets, internal and external. It's not simple because a lot of them don't come with social security. I mean, we're in the business of retirement. We have social security on the internal data sets. That makes it easier. External data sets generally don't.
Well, and as soon as you add that to your data set, now you have to handle it a whole different way. Compliance.
Then you have all kinds of other problems. So that is the problem that we're still solving really, really manually, which means all of those personalization, hyper-personalization, master data management initiatives are slow and expensive because trying to figure out manually multiple data sets, how you connect them,
and shouldn't it be the opposite of that? I mean, that's the thing, is we have to move at light speed now. Our customers are expecting whoever's the fastest to respond usually gets their business, right? This has to meet their expectations. I mean, that's a real challenge. How do we fix that?
That's a real challenge, yes. So that's, I keep challenging our vendor community, come up with that. Because the good thing is not just my problem, it's everybody's problem. But whoever solves that problem first and is able to do it quickly and bring new data and connect it quicker gets competitive advantage.
How much data can you actually ingest and then actually display to the customer? So I've always kind of taken the approach, I'll just share personal experience. It's more of less is more. Just keep it simple. Industry personalization, show them if you're sponsoring an industry event, industry roundtable by audience, maybe show their company name. We do something on our website. If you go to securityscorecard.com, it'll say like your company name. Would you like to see your score? Just something simple of that sort versus going to all-out personalization, particularly on websites, etc. Because if you go the other way, and now you're starting to pique the attention of, hey, wait a minute, what kind of data do they have on me, and is this compliant?
So it should be unobtrusive, and you should do it in a safe place. And don't go too far at first. Let it unfold.
Yeah. And it's a journey. And I think the point that Cindy made is about. It's not almost about personalization. It's about removing the friction. Right? Mm-hmm. We said that on the panel earlier. Yeah. How do you remove the friction? Because the thing is I think there's a few things. First of all, if I'm going to give you all of my data, I expect you to do something with it. And most companies, again, don't know what to do with it. So they're like, yeah, we're going to personalize. We're going to collect all this data. Don't know how I'm going to change my customer experience as a result of it. So that leaves me as a customer frustrated because now I'm like, I've given you all this data. I expect a more frictionless experience, a more personalized experience, and you're not giving it to me. So they're not thinking about the end-to-end strategy. And then the other piece is looking for simple ways that you can remove friction. So whether it's using things like voice biometrics as well. And then the other piece is, to your point about American Express, I think people have become more accepting of those things. But now that type of personalization is table stakes.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so 5-9, all those call centers that you call up and you get stuck on hold. Woohoo! That's us that's running through the platform there for you. But, I think they're the challenge that we have. One of the biggest things is CRM integration, because that, hey, I call up, hey Jennifer, how are you? Knowing your last transaction, knowing what the last engagement was, that's just expected. Yeah, that I think is another thing to take into consideration. Is technologically some of these things have been harder to do, and it's harder to adopt and build it into your process. But what does your customer think is the baseline of what the experience should be?
What are the barriers we still have to really tear down so that there isn't this barrier between us and the customer, that we are really engaging with them and not just doing an analytics exercise where we have tons of data on them and we can see it, but we don't do anything with it to bring them closer? So what are we missing? What are the barriers left to tear down to get this right?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think, data silos are still a big challenge, right? Unfortunately, I see so many customers who let org structure define how data gets used, how data gets shared across the organization. It's like, oh, well, yes, that's the initiative in that business unit, but that's not my business unit. So therefore, I must create my own data source, because clearly it won't be the same as their data source. Yes, because I've changed my date of birth for multiple different people. So I think that's one of them, right, is the data silos. I think the other piece, the other challenge is we see with a lot of our customers, because there are so many touch points, so many interactions, sometimes customers get a little bit stage frightened when it comes to surveying, right? No, I can't over-survey. So now they sort of stop reaching out to the customers, or they're doing it too infrequently, and that becomes a challenge. And then the third piece that we often see, I was talking to a customer about this the other day, is the way in which you gather voice of the customer. So a lot of techniques that customers are still using are very transactional, right? Surveys, NPS, even live interactive chats. They're still very transactional, and the time it takes, the lead time between getting the data in and taking action the window just becomes too big. And then, that data needs to be refreshed all the time. So I think moving to more things like sentiment analysis, interaction analytics, I think that's definitely a key thing. So I think those are the three big areas we see with a lot of our customers. It's the data silos, it's the lead time between gathering the data and taking action, and then it's also just the volume of data that is out there that you have to connect.
All right, we're all out of time, but these three distinguished panelists will be around for much or all of the day, I hope, and we continue the conversation. So please give our panelists a big hand.
Well, that's a wrap for episode 37 of CRTV. Get set for our next episode on July 27th.
And that's right, co-hosts Holger Mueller and Liz Miller, who will bring you the next episode of CRTV. In the meantime, follow us on LinkedIn and on Twitter at ConstellationR and at the hashtag at CRTV Show.
Thanks for watching and have a great week. Can you hear me now?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Are you recording yet?
I am. Yeah.
Let's save these priceless gems. It's going to be very little material to work with. If we can pester him and publicly shame him, that would probably help. He's like waking up and getting a cup of coffee, combing his hair.
He is having computer issues. BRT. Does that mean be right there?
Right there. Well, he's just back from Europe, so he's on German time or something. Where were you?
France and Belgium. Amazing food, yeah. Incredible. It's interesting. In France, all the portions are tiny, and in Belgium, all the portions are huge. And, and the people are appropriately sized as a result. It's very interesting. I am ready.
Just letting the dog in. Who let the dog out?
I got to recap the panel. Hold on.
All right, we had a little hiccup there.
I'm just trying to see where okay.
It's all right. We'll just go. I'll just go. Hannah just cut to the news here.
I'm just not sure on one of the script what I'm supposed to do.
Say the words, but first let's get to the news. But I did that, so let's just move on.
Okay, got it.
Anyway, here we are.
Nice. Well done. You're on brand.
We're at 12 now, right? Excellent. We are done.